This episode is sponsored by Realtor.com, who wants you to take advantage of your free profile on Realtor.com. By claiming and completing your free profile, adding a photo, and all of the information that puts you head and shoulders above the competition, you're on your way to receiving free leads, helping search engines find you, and staying top of mind with past clients. To learn more about claiming your free profile, go to Realtor.com/profile. Welcome to the Real View podcast, where Ohio Realtors connect you to innovators and influencers, keeping you with the real view of real estate. Whether you're a broker, agent, first-time homebuyer, industry leader, or just happen to stumble upon our podcast today, you can expect to hear tips, tools, tricks, interesting information, and so much more from the experts in Ohio's real estate game. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Real View podcast. I am your host, Allison Wiley. Joining me today is our special guest, Pam Blair. She is a broker owner of Yoga Bug Real Estate in Portland, Oregon. She is here today to give us a little moment of zen in this crazy time. As her and I were chatting before we started recording, there's a lot going on in this world, and we all need to learn how to deal with what's going on in a way that makes sense for us, in a way that is healthy, in a way that can still make us successful realtors. So, Pam, welcome onto the show. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you, Allison. It's such a pleasure to be here, especially to talk about this topic. Yeah, it's one of my favorites. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I know our members and listeners are going to connect to this because, wow, I mean, if there's ever a time where we need to be honing in on our focus and doing everything that we can to keep ourselves grounded and centered, I think now is a pretty good time to be doing that. So, but before we get started in that, I would like to hear a little bit more about you, your background, how you got started in real estate. Tell us what's led you to where you are today.
Thank you. Yeah. So I'm coming up on 19 years in the business. Really hard to believe, time flies. And I got into real estate because I just thought it checked all the boxes for me. And it has. I've loved it. It has kept me challenged and love the business. So I've been a yogi since 1997. So I was a yogi before I was a realtor and didn't have any idea that I would merge those two worlds together when I became an agent. But shortly after being in the business, I realized that a lot of my clients were coming from the yoga world. And I wanted more of that to happen in my business. And so I started brainstorming, like, how do I make that connection? I had done yoga teacher training. And so I was starting to teach yoga, but you can't exactly walk into a yoga class and be, at the end say, oh, by the way, when you're ready to buy or sell, reach out to me. It's not very zen to do that. So I decided to brand myself in 2011 as Yoga Bug Real Estate and do kind of the crazy thing of merging those two worlds, because I realized that I was the same person in both of those worlds. And so that's what I wanted to bring together. So I started that bit part of my business by offering a wellness series. I had all of these really cool friends that were acupuncturists and restaurant owners and in the wellness world. So I started hosting a wellness series in my real estate office, and I invited all of my yoga students to it. So that's kind of how Yoga Bug started. I got really involved in yoga nonprofits and creating events, and it just snowballed, honestly, Allison. I ended up, evidently, I'm the only person in the United States that has done this crazy thing. And so Inman found me, invited me to be on their stage, I think in like 2013 or something, to talk about branding. And it's just been an incredible journey. In 2019, I decided to open my own little boutique, Yoga Bug Real Estate. And that's been, that's just been kind of the cream on top of everything. So it's been fun. It's been a wild ride, but fun.
No, I love that. Thank you for sharing a little bit more about that. And you're right. I do think you're the first person that's kind of blended these two worlds together. And at first glance, you might not think that these worlds can exist together, but I love that you've made that possible, that you found a way to do it and that they can exist together, because I do think so much of the practices and what's taught in yoga, and I've been in enough yoga classes, to know a little bit about it, but the practices and the belief system behind yoga, I think, can be so beneficial to realtors. So I love that kind of you saw that too, and you saw that opportunity and are really paving the way for this space for realtors to have this wellness aspect of it, to be taking care of their physical, mental, and emotional well being because it's so important. I always think that we can only be as successful as how we are, feeling and operating. And if, our psyche's off, our emotional, physical, mental health is off, then I think it's going to trickle down to our business.
Absolutely. I agree completely. I mean, burnout is pervasive in our industry. And one thing when I came into it, I was so excited about the industry, but I was a bit disillusioned with how focused it was completely on production and how you deal with just never turning off. I mean, basically there were no coping strategies or business strategies around that. So I feel grateful to have been able to weave that into my business and offer it to others.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's why we wanted you to come on today, is to share a little bit of these practices and beliefs with us, to share how we can take better care of ourselves, to share how we can focus and stay rid of all the distractions and everything that we have going around us. Because, man, there is a lot, right?
There is a lot. It's endless. Yeah. It's not rocket science, really, but it's also profound. Like, when we get busy in our business and we want to be successful, it's so easy to put these things aside and think that we'll get to them later. And we've all done that and suffered the consequences of it. So, especially in a time like now where we have more distractions and really big distractions in our industry and in the world, the simplest things, Allison, like what are we eating? I mean, food, when we're talking about focus in particular, there are actually studies that show that there are specific foods that help with our focus, that help our brains function. And you've probably heard of all these. So the good news is that coffee and chocolate are on the list. So I start out almost every morning now. I'm addicted to this smoothie that I started making. Yes. And if you want the recipe, just hit me up on Instagram or something. It has chocolate, coffee, bananas, dates, avocado, which is also on the good brain food, some oat milk. I mean, it's a great way to start off the day. But, eating nuts, lots of berries, lots of green leafy vegetables, feeding our body in ways that nurture us is so foundational to how we're going to feel and how we're going to show up in our day. And then of course, exercise. I mean, I can't stay still, so I'm blessed with the need to exercise all the time. I hike a mountain every week. I do yoga every day. I have to get this body moving for me to just stay in balance. But not everybody has a deep urge like that. But it is actually shown. So you have to kind of find what your jam is, right? What speaks to you? What speaks to your body? Maybe you need a trainer. Maybe you need an accountability buddy. Whatever it is that's going to keep you moving. I mean, at least 3 times a week, if not more, move daily if you can. I stand at my desk. I never sit all day long. So, I'm like stretching and doing all this crazy stuff. But the studies actually show that people who exercise, the memory parts of their brains, some studies show that they're actually larger than people who don't exercise.
Wow. And I think like people might think that exercising is so overwhelming. How am I going to fit an hour going to the gym? But it can be as simple as just walking around your house, walking up and down the stairs. I mean, it can be that simple when you break it down like that.
It really can. I would just always encourage people to move. Just move, whether it's lifting your arms over your head or, like you said, putting a load of laundry in. I mean, keep it simple and keep it manageable and just move your body, period. I think the mind always wants to make self-care complex, and it really isn't. It should be a basic need of ours.
Yeah, you're right.
Break it down. You don't have to be the perfect eater. You don't have to be the best exerciser. Just do what you can do, and and then what happens is you start to feel better, and then you want it more.
No, it's true. You will see, I know on days that I exercise, I feel it is noticeable, the difference. I mean, I feel so much better on days that I don't. I mean, it's so noticeable. It makes you feel so much better. I mean, I just can't, emphasize that enough, the importance of that. And just go on a short walk. It doesn't have to be a crazy 60 minutes in the gym, like just the littlest things, like you said, make a big difference.
I agree. Fresh air, water, really, just keep a glass of water next to your computer and make it a habit to drink the water. And yeah, the smallest things are going to make the biggest difference. Hydrate that brain.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And another thing that you mentioned in this article too is what else you do in your brain. So we're now stimulating it, we're getting it healthier, happier, but it's also about what we're conjuring up in our mind. You can kind of go into a little bit more detail about what I'm talking about here, about what we can do with our mind to help us kind of refocus and get into a better mental state.
Yeah, it's huge. I call it controlling your imagery. In an article, I gave the example of my dog. I have two border collies, so hyper focused dogs. And every morning, I'm on one end of the leash and that dog is pulling me to the park. And the entire way to the park, I know all she can see is the ball, in her little brain. And that is hyper focus. And I think what I would like to share is that we always have imagery that we are putting our focus on. And oftentimes it's unconscious. We don't realize that maybe we're rehashing something that happened yesterday, or we're worried about something that's in our future rather than actually being in the present. And so practices like yoga, meditation, prayer, maybe it's, again, something as simple as taking a walk and looking at what's around you. Maybe it's something as simple as taking 10 deep breaths to pay attention to the now of the breath. And once we become aware of actually the imagery we have going on in our mind and our brain, then we can start to have some control over that. We can say, now, actually, what am I looking at and what do I want to look at? So, some people do affirmations. Some people just have positive images, or maybe you have a goal you want to reach, or maybe it's just a sense of calm you take yourself to when you are on that beach, on vacation. Einstein even said the imagination is way more powerful than the intellect.
That's so important, to think about how we can imagine in the right ways, imagine in healthy ways that are going to make us feel better, feel more rejuvenated, feel more focused. I love that. And that will just increase our support, increase and support our focus and getting, what we need to be focusing on in our minds. So I love that. I think that's such a good tip. And when we're thinking about other things that we're doing, so we're envisioning things in our brain, we're eating good, we're exercising, moving our body. Another thing we can do and think about is who we're surrounding ourselves with, right? And I think this is incredibly, incredibly important too when we're thinking about how we're focusing and how we're getting the best mental state that we can get. Tell us how important it is to create that environment where we feel supported, where we feel good, and how we can achieve that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's huge. And I think, again, it's one of those things where well, I can cope with this. It's not that important, but it actually is. So in the article, I start with actually your physical environment, I have home office, a lot of us do. And what do I place in my space? What imagery, again, is going to support me? I try to keep my space quiet. I keep it the right temperature. All those things, our body's constantly bombarded with stimuli. And when we start to control the stimuli in a way where it decreases physical, emotional, and mental stress by something as simple as temperature and light. Some people are very sensitive to certain kinds of light. How is that for you? So start with just your physical environment. What's going to support your focus? Often lessening distraction will do so. So often when I want to focus on something too, I will turn off my phone. I'll use the silence on my phone. I'll turn off all the other programs on my computer so I don't get notifications. All those things make a big difference. And then, of course, outside of that, who are we interacting with during the day? That cannot be under stress. Who do we bring in to our environment? I mean, I know we're all going to have clients or colleagues or family or whatever that we have challenging situations. But one of the main things about my business is that when I became Yoga Bug Real Estate, I knew that I was going to attract a very specific person to me. And what that meant was that I had to let everybody else go and not be afraid of that. And I think the more we can step into what supports us, both personally and professionally, with who we surround ourselves with, then we just set ourselves up to win.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned that because our coach here at Ohio Realtors just wrote an article, I think last week, on how to let go of people who you've outgrown, who no longer served you, how to recognize that, how you can kind of navigate that. So that can be tough sometimes. And as you mentioned, it's hard to kind of let go of that and know that you're going to be moving away from something that no longer benefits you. Those energy vampires, they that I've heard them be called before, you know?
And I've been reminded a lot in the past year, sometimes we just grow and we outgrow people. And so it's like, well, why is that relationship no longer flourishing in my life? And maybe it's not a bad thing. Maybe it's actually a really positive thing. Oh, I've moved on. I've extracted what I needed from that relationship, and thank you for it.
Yeah, and it's totally okay. When we think about, letting go of people or not being growing away from people, it's not that doesn't always have to be a bad thing. And I think that that's a great way to look at it. And that it's okay to know that, some people aren't going to be in our lives forever. And that's okay.
It is. It's natural, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that you mentioned too, just the importance of keeping our space free. And I know we've talked about clutter before, and I've talked about clutter and just what that does to our brain and how that makes us feel. So you're right, being in a physical space that is going to set you up in the best way for success is so important too. Just even the littlest changes, like taking out the bag of clothes that's been sitting in your car for Salvation Army for 6 months and just getting that away. It does so much good for your mental health and for your brain that you'd be surprised.
Yeah, it is. I'm going to confess, I'm neurotic that way. I don't like anything to weigh me down. I like to travel light. And so I have nothing on my desk. It's insane. I have like this tiny, but that makes my mind clear. And the more important thing, Allison, is makes me relax.
Yes.
And when I relax, I'm really efficient.
This episode of The Real View is brought to you by the Ohio Association of Community Colleges. Ohio's network of community colleges provides accessible training that accommodates the busy lifestyles of aspiring real estate professionals at half the price of a traditional university. With convenient locations in every part of the state, as well as online options, Ohio's community colleges are your smart choice for pre-licensing education. For more details or to start the journey to a real estate career, visit the education page at ohiorealtors.org and then click on the pre-license course locations.
Yes, yes. And just the feeling of that in your body, it's so much better to operate from that space. And another thing, that when we think about our body and how we're feeling is the importance of sleep and rest. And you talk about this too. And these are two of my favorite personal things, is sleeping and resting. Who doesn't love that? But it's not something that we always prioritize. So talk us through a little bit of the importance of that and how we can all do a better job at that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have to say, as much as I've surrounded myself with positive things and supported myself, resting is not necessarily my strength. I'm a go bunny. So it's something I really have to be purposeful with. And there are so many different ways to rest. We've kind of been talking about some of them in that just being very purposeful in your energy during the day. You might rest by turning off your computer, by turning off social media, by, taking a walk with your dog, by any of that. But recently I read something or heard something that said, how we say, oh, we'll catch up on it. I actually read something that said that's an illusion. That once you lose rest, there is no getting it back. And it makes sense from a cellular, molecular place, chemistry place in your body, that like if you're running, your adrenals are worn down, you're just totally exhausted, you're not going to be able to just jump back and all of a sudden a nap's going to restore you. So it's a real discipline to rest. So here's what I do. Another confession. I never work past 6 o'clock in the evening. I am in bed by 8 or 9 at the latest. And I definitely never keep my phone anywhere near me. And I stop and do yoga repeatedly throughout the day and stretch. So this rest thing has become a discipline for me, and it's become kind of a sacred space. And I really encourage people, because you're worth it, to make your rest a sacred space, whatever rest is for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know the benefits of getting good rest, to getting that sleep that you deserve. I think I saw some wellness article that said, not getting enough sleep can be as harmful as having a really bad diet and doing all these really bad things for your body. Not getting that rest and that sleep can be just as harmful.
It can. And as you know, as in our industry, we run so hard, so fast. And so we're depleting ourselves on, physical, emotional, and mental level. And we're just not we're not superheroes. So if we don't honor our bodies and the rest of our constitution, we're going to end up in the burnout. And we've probably all been there. I've been there more than once. And it's not a fun place to go, and we really do deserve better. I think that whole thing of being like, no, I actually deserve this rest. I'm going to turn everything off and trust that everything will be fine and I'll be better in the morning for it, type of thing.
Yeah, so true. And usually you are. And a lot of the times you are. But just training yourself and having that discipline, you're right, is so important. So we kind of talked about, the eating right, training our brains to think about positive things, training our bodies, moving our bodies, getting enough rest. But then another component of the brain is to do this, as you call, unfocused activity. So tell us what that is and how we can practice that.
I think it manifests for different people in different ways, obviously. There's actually this guy named Jerome Singer who has studied this. And he studied, I don't know that he calls it unfocused, he might, but he studied the power of kind of allowing yourself to daydream. I get this image of like the little kid in the elementary school class where all these kids are riveted to the teacher, and then there's the kid looking out the window.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that kid probably knew something more than he or she thought they knew, because when it's again kind of controlling your attention, if you're hyper focused like my border collie all the time, you're going to burn out at some point. So this actually relates to looking at our computer screen. So if we're looking at our computer screens all day long and we literally turn and look out the window for 3 minutes, that's like unfocusing. That's coming back to the moment. That's giving your nervous system a rest, maybe allowing your imagination to go someplace that's more relaxing and more stimulating in kind of a more positive way for it. So whether that's, again, going for a walk or just lying down, closing your eyes or listening to some music, whatever kind of taps into that feels like more of a childlike or a playful like part of us. I think, especially as like really serious real estate agents, we could learn a lot from that. And unfortunately, I feel like in our industry, it's like we work really hard and then we have a cocktail at the end of the day, and that's the way we tend to wind down.
Yep. Guilty. But you're right. And just finding different ways to reset too. I know I feel better a lot of the times when I'm like, oh my God, I've been sitting here for 3 hours. I should get up. And you just feel so much better the instant you get up and move and just change your environment, change the scenery. You feel so much better, and it's such a good reset. And you can come back and it just resets your whole mentality and your whole way that you're approaching whatever task you're working on. So we kind of have a good game plan and a good layout of how we can find our focus, recenter, get back into balance with ourselves. What did you say to realtors who are like, I don't even know where to start? Where should they just begin with some of these practices and tips?
I would begin with, for just one day, carve out 30 minutes of that day or 20 minutes and sit down and write down some of the things that you feel are really taking from you and not giving to you. Some of the things that you find really distracting in your day. Like, this is part of my day. I can't necessarily get rid of it, but this is So I think becoming aware of what's affecting us is a starting point. And something as simple as just writing a few things down, it's like, oh God, I never really put it on paper. Yeah, actually, I would start with that.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, there it goes back to focus, right? Whenever you spend the time, give the time to the stuff, that has been weighing you down, when you actually focus on it, you can see it in front of you. You're like, wow, I didn't realize how much, this was costing me in my life. And it can be a lot.
It can be a lot, and in that day, you could be like, all right, 5 times today, I'm going to write, when I feel stressed, I'm going to write down what's happening when I'm stressed. Something super simple like that, just starting with awareness.
I think so too. And I think when we think about distractions and how we can clear our mind from them, is there any way that distractions can be a positive thing? Can they ever play a good role in our life, or is it always just the thing that we gotta get rid of?
No, I think that's a really great question. I don't think we should relate to distractions in a negative way, because honestly, if you're like, oh God, this thing is driving me crazy, you're just giving it more power. So distractions are trying to get our attention for some reason. There's a reason that they're there. And so I think the more we take care of ourselves, the more we feed ourselves, exercise, rest, set our environment up, that when that little ping comes here or there, all of a sudden it's like, oh, gee, yeah, maybe that's an opportunity over there. Or maybe what I'm doing now isn't the best use of my time or energy, So I agree. I think so much of it's viewpoint, Allison. But if we're not in the right space to adopt that viewpoint or see what's being shown to us, we'll just miss the message.
Yeah, I think so too. And it'll be seen as a negative thing still, if we're not in that right mindset, if we're not in the space that we can look at it and say, oh, okay.
Totally. If your nervous system's shot, a lot of things are going to bother you.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, I think we've got a ton of great tips, a ton of great tools, a ton of good things to practice. I know I want to do better on a lot of these things, and I think we all can do better too, but give yourself grace too. I think when you're practicing this, it's okay to not be a rock star at it all the first time. It's okay, to not be perfect. I think that's important when we think about this too, right?
It's huge, actually. And we will never be perfect. And that, for me as a practitioner of yoga in particular, and I share this with my students all the time, it's like the deeper I get into the practice, the more humility I need to have, because I realize it's endless. Like you refine and refine, and then all of a sudden you see the next stage. It's endless. So I agree. Just be kind, just be kind and celebrate your wins, man. Don't forget that. Like if you ate blueberries today and you never ate blueberries before, celebrate you ate blueberries, whatever.
Yeah, no, it's so true though. And if you took the stairs instead of the elevator, that's something to celebrate too. And live in those victories. They're so rare and so, we gloss over them so quickly. It's so easy to do that. But when we take a step back and really say, be proud of yourself, pat yourself on the back, it makes you feel better too. It makes you feel like, wow, I can do this.
Yeah. And something exactly. And I know for me, it's really easy to not acknowledge the wins. That's part of my personality. So I actually do a review. I have a morning practice that I do, and I'll do a little review the day before. And that's been really helpful for me to kind of clean the slate, acknowledge what went the way I wanted, what went the way maybe I didn't want, and then move forward with a clean slate for my day. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. Celebrate those wins. We deserve it.
Absolutely. We work hard, man.
Yeah. Well, Pam, this is so fantastic. Thank you so much again for coming on, for sharing these tips, for making us feel better about ourselves mentally, physically, emotionally, all of that. I know we can all take away something from this and implement it in our everyday lives. That'll make us be better people, better realtors, better members of our community. So thank you so much for coming on. And I truly enjoyed hearing a little bit more about you and your mindset.
Thank you so much, Allison. It was fun. Thanks so much.
And to all of our listeners, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll be back with you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Real View. That wraps up today's episode. You can keep up with the latest on the podcast at ohiorealtors.org/therealview and on Apple or Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Have questions, comments, or suggestions? We want to hear from you. Email us at podcast@ohiorealtors.org. We'll see you next time.